All right, I know I've been joking about the North Melbourne game all week about how we have two buys coming up, so let's get serious for the next 25 minutes odd and talk about the game that we have against North Melbourne this Sunday at 1 o'clock at Marvel Stadium. As I've said before, hopefully we get less and less games at Marvel in the future. We've got a marketable team like Collingwood, so let's go to the Gold Coast and have an extra game there during the school holidays as it's been suggested and get our asses away from Marvel because that ground is just such a dead energy place. Like I can't remember the last time I went when the roof was open, so I don't know what it's like when the Marvel roof is actually open these days, but when it's closed, it's just, there's something ominous about that feeling at Marvel. Maybe it's just because the games I've gone to at Marvel, Collingwood haven't played well. So you guys do the math and figure out what's going on there. Let's quickly jump into the injury list and see where everybody is at rolling into North Melbourne and then the bye. We've got Pendles, the update is 2 weeks, same as the Goey. Tom Mitchell with that plantar fascia surgery. We'll probably see him out closer to the end of the regular season, as well as Jamie Elliott. Josh Cartmichael's an interesting one. I'd like to get your thoughts, guys, in the comment section if you know anything about this one. He's been listed as ongoing concussion protocols for the large part of at least the last 4 to 6 weeks, I think. And there hasn't been a lot of dialogue from the football club. So I'm concerned. Is he going to be forced to medically retire? I don't know. If you guys know anything more than that, I'd be keen to hear your thoughts in the comment section. As I've said with McStay, he's rolling into the match simulation drills post-bye. My check says how many 3 weeks. Ned Long, the mid-season draft acquisition, 2 weeks with the calf. Mason Cox still going to be out for a large part of 5 to 7 weeks. There's a bit of an open timeline there with the MCL. Joe Richards, 2 to 3 weeks, and Oscar Steen, 6 to 8 weeks. The new injury that we incurred in that game against the Dees was when Nick Dacos hit his shin on Neil Bullen. And that was late in the third, and then I think he tried coming back on in the fourth quarter, but had another knock on the outside of his shin. So the first knock was the inside, and then from there, the outside was also affected. So they made the business decision to wrap him up in cotton wool and let him rest out for the last quarter, and now he's listed as a test. Will he play? Will he not play? What would I do? I guess if you have your best team, you play your best team. But I would definitely err on the side of caution. And I like to think if we can beat Melbourne with limited impact and input from Nick Dacos on King's birthday, then there's no excuse as to why the Pies shouldn't be able to beat North without Nick Dacos. And if that's the case, then we don't deserve to win the premiership because we've got to be able to do it in many different ways. Clubs maybe saw some sort of success from Neil Bullen tagging Nick Dacos. They might make more of a concerted effort to knuckle down on Nick Dacos around the stoppage contest in particular, because that's where he's been thriving. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. We'll have a look at it. Moving to Magnets tonight and get the extended teams. Then tomorrow night we'll do the final teams as well. So be sure to jump into live streams for those ones. For North Melbourne, they've got Griffin Logue, who's a week away after doing his ACL last season, and then McKercher, their highly touted draft pick from the 2023 draft, is still out for another week. And then Will Dawson, pick 22 from the 2023 draft. He hurt his shoulder in his game I think it was his debut game last week, so we won't be seeing Will Dawson feature in the backline for North. I think he's a key position, versatile defender, so that's actually quite a unfortunate out for them. So last time we played North Melbourne was last year on a Sunday. I think it was round 12 before King's birthday then actually. And we beat them by 35 odd points. We won every quarter. It was pretty much a comprehensive win, a really professional win if you want to call it that. I think we butchered them from turnover. We had 66 points from turnover, and that's a really good return from the turnover score sources. And we also locked them in their forward half for quite some time of the game, scoring 10 goals, originating within the forward half for Collingwood in that game. Surprisingly, they kicked 3 goals from centre bounce to our 1 goal. This year, I think in the last 5 matches, we're top 4 from centre bounce score sources. And guys, keep an eye on this. The best teams usually going into final series are relentless from the middle. When they get their centre clearances, they score from them. The game against Brisbane in the grand final last year, we had quite a few players that we scored from because of those centre bounces. I think it was the very next centre bounce late in that last quarter where Charlie Cameron scored. It was Pendles, DeGoey and Dacos in the middle. Pendles gets the clearance. My check makes the contest. DeGoey gets the ball. Oh no, sorry. Dacos gets the ball mid-air, hand passes DeGoey and scores, and we respond essentially immediately. And that's the importance of being able to score from centre bounces. So that's the case there. It was actually a game where both teams were very efficient going inside 50. Collingwood had 53 inside 50s and 25 scoring shots, which is an elite return, really. I think scoring shots per inside 50, what's considered elite in the AFL these days, is 25%. So 1 in 4 inside 50s, if you score a behind or a goal, you're in good company and you're in good stead for your year. We scored almost on 50% of the times we went into North Melbourne's defensive 50. But on the other hand, North Melbourne had 43 inside 50s and 22 shots. So they were just as efficient as us. They just didn't have as many entries. And both teams were relatively, I guess Collingwood were definitely a lot more accurate. We kicked 16 goals, 9 to 10 goals, 10. So a quite efficient game all the way around. Let's quickly have a look back at the players who picked up coaches' votes from those games. I personally think coaches' votes are a little bit more coveted than Brownlow votes, as the coaches know what they're doing, they see the game, they understand the game, whereas umpires, they're trying to do a job umpiring, and then they're also asked to make some votes on players who played well in that game, and these umpires have barely half an idea compared to what coaches have. But the 10 coaches' votes for that game, meaning both coaches gave maximum votes to Jordan DeGoey, 5 and 5 makes 10, had 35 disposals, 15 contested possessions, 10 inside 50s, 5 clearances, and also had a goal himself. So unfortunately, we're not going to have DeGoey for this game with that abdominal. I'm hoping when he comes back, he's going to be in good nick. It'll be really intriguing to see where he lands position-wise, at least to end the regular season. Will we see DeGoey roll through the middle? Will he play forward? I think a lot of what we'll have to do with where we decide to play DeGoey is what is our availability across the ground. Is Jamie Elliott back? Is Joe Richards there? Where's Tom Mitchell? Where's Scott Pendlebury? Where are these sort of players that will give us an idea of where DeGoey will play? And then the next player who collected 5 coaches' votes was Nick Larkey, 13 disposals and 5 goals, 2. So he was in a team that was largely dominated for the most part of the game. He still found a way to kick his 5 goals and probably could have had more, missing those 2 shots. So yeah, our defence is always going to have a task on hand when Nick Larkey's on the field. The next player with another handful of coaches' votes being 5 is Nick Dacos, 32 disposals, 11 contested possessions, 10 ground ball gets and 7 clearances. Did he kick a goal? He kicked a goal and 6 tackles. So it's going to be interesting. We could be without our 2 best performers from that game from last season in Jordan DeGoey and Nick Dacos. If Nick Dacos doesn't obviously get over that shin knock, he won't be playing against the shin boners. So that'll be interesting, but his brother was the next best player with another handful of votes being 5, 18 disposals, 3 shots, 3 goals. So a really efficient game and 5 scoring involvements. And he's quietly making the case for All-Australian contention at the end of the year. In my video that I did for my mid-season All-Australian team, I had Nick Dacos and Josh Dacos in there for Collingwood. I'm just not sure. I think last year, guys correct me if I'm wrong, but last year they made the change to ensure that wingers are actual wingers in the All-Australian team and not just like on-ballers, because they wanted to fit in maybe like a Petrarca or a Bont, for example. Or what they do on the forward line, they just put elite midfielders in the forward line on like a half-forward flank instead of playing genuine high half-forward flankers or small to medium-sized forwards. So yeah, I've got Josh Dacos as a sneak, along with Errol Goulden on the other side, of course. Isaac Quaynor also managed to collect 4 coaches' votes that game. He had 19 disposals and 3 intercept marks. So as I've mentioned many, many times in the last few weeks, he's a victim to his role. He's not always going to have the impact he has had, particularly last season, on a consistent basis, averaging over 2 intercept marks per game. This year it's looked a little bit different for whatever reason. I can't exactly put my finger on it. The only thing I can suggest is the ball is just not going his way as much as it did last year. And I think maybe we're, as a team, doing a little bit better since round 2, defending in front of our forward half, essentially. So just looking at North Melbourne's last 5 matches statistics, and they're pretty much well below AFL average for every single game. I guess what will be a more fair reflection going into this game is the clash between West Coast and North Melbourne last week that was in Perth. Obviously, North Melbourne got the win. They overcame some demons in the last quarter. So that will give us a better idea, just seeing as it's the most recent game and North finally win their first game and they take that momentum for the first time this year into another game. And it just so happens to be against Collingwood. And once again, it seems to be, it's another grand final for another side coming up against us at the wrong time for us and the right time for them. So it will be interesting. It makes for a more interesting narrative if North Melbourne come in without winning a game. It's like, oh, well, then it really is a bye. But now North Melbourne, they've got this winning, it's a winning confidence. Like if you play sport or you're around the game, you understand that winning just changes everything. And had North Melbourne, they had games early in the season, one against Fremantle, where they were up by 4 or 5 goals early in the game. If they win that game that early in the year, it could have changed the trajectory of their entire season. They were playing some good footy then, and then you lose a few more games and you lose your confidence, the mood is down, it's not nice. It's really not nice, and it lingers and it festers and it spreads, and then all of a sudden you get a really good win in Perth against West Coast, who have beaten good sides themselves. They've beaten Fremantle and they've beaten Melbourne. So it's not necessarily a walkover in Perth. So the first thing that springs out to me right away from the West Coast versus North game is North Melbourne had a lesser amount of inside 50s, being 43, and they still managed to get 22 scoring shots on goal. And guys, I just want to quickly correct myself regarding that scoring shots per inside 50. If you're scoring at around the 45 and beyond that percent mark per inside 50, so a little bit less than 1 in 2, then you're elite. The 25% one I was referring to was if you score a goal. So if you're scoring 1 in 4, kicking a goal, you're doing very well. However, with scoring shots, you want to be close to that 45 to 50 bracket to be considered doing really well. And North did that against West Coast, 43 inside 50s, 22 scoring shots. So essentially more than 50% of the time they're going in West Coast inside 50, they were scoring against the likes of Jeremy McGovern, Tom Barrass. And then conversely, West Coast 58 inside 50s, 25 scoring shots. So not quite as efficient. So there's a story there. North Melbourne definitely brought the heat. They registered 87 tackles for the game against West Coast, where West Coast had 62 tackles. So they brought the heat. They were ready for it. And you just know they're going to be, I can only imagine they're going to bring the same amount of pressure to the contest on Sunday against Collingwood. As far as score sources were concerned for the game, North Melbourne did really well to hurt West Coast from turnover. They scored 8 goals compared to West Coast's 3. However, I mean, West Coast did miss quite a few shots. That was another narrative of the story. They kicked 8 goals and 17 behinds. So it could have been a very different story had West Coast kicked straight, and they only managed to find the 2 big sticks late in the game in the 4th quarter. I think up until 3/4 time, they'd only kicked 2 goals for the entirety of the game, which is unreal. All right, let's look at some of the top performers from North Melbourne for the game. Jai Simpkin, 28 touches, the 10 coaches vote, so 5 from each coach, 12 contested possessions, and 2 goals and 7 tackles. So he really wound back the clock. And I know that's unusual to say considering Jai Simpkin is still relatively young, but he's really been out of form for the good part of this year and last year. And we really thought he was going to be a great leader for the club, being North Melbourne, and he was going to step up. And yeah, he's really just taken a back seat. I don't know what it is. Is it because of some of the concussions he's had and he's lost a bit of continuity in his game with injuries? I'm not too sure, but he was definitely back in a big way for this game. The next best player was Nick Larkey, 15 disposals, 12 of them being kicks. He had 5 shots, 5 goals. So we just know how efficient Nick Larkey is in front of goal, so it's going to be important. As I mentioned, Collingwood needed a lockdown on him. He's a great mark on lead in particular. So I think Darcy Moore's going to have to knuckle down and play a little bit tighter than what he's probably typically used to. I think he had the role on Nick Larkey last season, so it'll be interesting maybe do we swing back a Billy Frampton? But we'll save that conversation for a little bit later in the video. Harry Sheezel was unreal, had 30 disposals, 12 contested possessions, 11 ground ball gets. He had 40% centre bounce attendances for the game and 8 score involvements. So he's just going to be another player that we're probably going to have to look to lock down in some way or another, at least around the stoppages. Would he have 2 clearances, which is not a lot. So maybe he'll relish the opportunity to maybe play on someone like Nick Dacos, where Alison Clark says, hey mate, Sheezel, go play on their best player, follow him around, go sniff his butt and learn from the best in someone like Nick Dacos. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a matchup that we see for the entirety of the game on Sunday. Since round 9, Luke Davies-Uniacke has returned in a big way. His game against Gold Coast had 35 disposals, 27 against Essendon, 35 against Port Adelaide, and then 26 against West Coast. He's averaging a goal a game out of those 5 last games he's played, so he's going to be someone we're going to have to keep an eye on. He started off slow from memory early in the season as far as, I guess, performance output-wise. He was still finding the ball, but maybe his disposals weren't as clean, but he's taken his game to another level. He's had a game-high 17 contested possessions, or a season-high 17 contested possessions a few weeks ago in that Gold Coast game. And it's a player that Collingwood are looking at in the free agency market. So it'll be a good opportunity for us as viewers to see what Luke Davies-Uniacke is about. Has he cleaned up his disposal? Can he play well against a team that is better than his team? So how does he play when his team necessarily will be have their backs against the wall? And in all fairness, their backs have been against the wall all season, and he's been honourable. And he's been recognised, he's been getting coaches' votes in all of the last 4 games he's played. So it's a player that will definitely be looking to have an impact and continue to return on some coaches' votes in the game on Sunday. All right, fringe players and selection talk. So Nathan Kruger comes in against Melbourne, does an amazing job, kicks his 3 goals. So that sort of leaves, I guess, Ash Johnson in the dark now. At VFL level, he had 11 touches, 1 goal. So it'll be tough for Ash Johnson to find a way back into the team, especially once we get Brodie Myercheck, McStay, and Mason Cox back. And then you got Nathan Kruger and then Ash Johnson. So he'd be 5th string right now. You maybe even put a Reef McInnes in front of Ash Johnson. But who can we see coming in? Let's say, hypothetically, Nick Dacos is out, okay? Then you're looking at 3 players from the VFL side that played against Casey. You've got Harry Dimitia, who was best on. He had 23 touches, kicked 1 goal. And then you have Tujath, who actually was an unused emergency for Collingwood's AFL game, meaning he didn't play in the VFL because he was the next player in if there was to be a late omission for the team. That wasn't to be, so I guess TJ doesn't get to play a game or get something under his belt. He would have done his conditioning after the game anyways. And then we've also got Reef McInnes, who did play midfield in the VFL game. Caleb said around the 40% mark he played in the midfield. And I think that's just being proactive and risk-averse from a selection panel side. They've said, well, Ned Long, who we've just acquired in the mid-season draft, is a big-bodied midfielder, but now he's out for a couple more weeks. Tom Mitchell's going to be out for a little bit longer. Pendlebury's out. Jordan De Goey is out. So our midfield stocks are quite low. And we know Reef McInnes was brought into the AFL as a midfielder. He was drafted as a midfielder. He's very quick. So they're probably looking at, all right, well, maybe we're not getting the most out of Reef McInnes in the forward line. He's averaging 2 goals a game, but I just don't remember saying, wow, Reef really dominated that game. So, and I think he deserves more than that. And that's why maybe they're going to look at a Reef McInnes playing in the midfield, because Reef McInnes being a role player in the forward line, I just don't know if those 2 things intertwine very well. I think there's more to be seen with Reef McInnes, and I'm pretty sure by the looks of it, with what they're doing with Reef in the VFL, they're also ambitious and optimistic that they can get a little bit more out of this guy, and I believe that too. Outside of that, I think Jack Bytel is probably in some sort of danger. He played against the Doggies, didn't play well at all, was used as a sub, and had minimal impact when he came on, despite it being late in the game. I think it was early in the fourth that he was activated. If we look at what happened recently, Will Parker was the sub for the last 2 games from memory, and then didn't really have much of an impact when he came on late in the game last week against the Doggies, and then he was dropped. So if that's anything to go by, trend-wise, I think Bytel could be on the way out for this game. And then, like I said, we'll probably see one of our 2023 draftees in TJ and or Harry Di Mattia, and then maybe Reef McInnes with one of them. So that would be really exciting to see in a game against North Melbourne. Hey, if you want to get some players into the team and find their way at AFL level, a game against North Melbourne is probably a really good game where you inject some youth who are really wanting to prove themselves and establish themselves. Whereas if you put a bunch of players who have been there, done that against a lowly North at Marvel Stadium on a Sunday, it's going to be cold outside and then they're just shrugging their heads and they can't be asked. You get a player like TJ or Harry Di Mattia coming in, they want to prove a point, they're going to play their best game, like they're at the MCG in front of 100,000 in a finals-like intensity. I can guarantee you that. And that's the benefit of considering these players rolling into the game against North. And that actually segments into what I'd like to see from Collingwood, is playing some of those youngsters in this game and really find out about those 2023 draftees. The next thing I want to see is Bobby Hill having more scoreboard impact. He's gone a bit quiet over these last few games. Let's have a look at his stats here. Give me one moment. So he's averaging a goal a game right now in his last 7 matches. What do I think about that? I'd like to see that bump up to 1.5 or 2 for the year. We know what he does when he's high up the ground. He's always looking to have an imprint in the game, which is obviously a testament to his work rate and his willingness to or want to be involved. You see that against the Dees. I think he had 9 disposals, 100% disposal efficiency. He's always looking for the best pass, and sometimes to his own demise, but you look at moments in the game against the Dees where he steps one player, then he runs into Cozzy Picker, you think he's finished, and then he drops him and sits him on his ass and then disposes of the ball. I think he was the one who got the ball off Billy Frampton from Hoskin Elliott's mark, and then he kicks it over to Nathan Kruger for his first goal of the game. So he's definitely looking for ways to impact the game by way of goal assist and just getting high up the ground and being that real link-up player. But I'd love to see Bobby Hill get some reward for effort and kick 2 or 3 against North Melbourne. Just a little bit of appreciation for Patrick Lipinski, who is doing quietly good this year. He's clean, he's a great link-up player, like I said, clean, going inside 50 in particular, which is important. Goal assists coming out of his ass. He had 2 against Melbourne. He had 3 against Fremantle. He's kicking goals. I think he's averaging a goal a game. He's getting a bit of opportunity inside the midfield. He had 23% last week against the Doggies, only 4 against Melbourne, but playing that winger/half forward role. He's really come out of his shell this year. Last year, his preseason was interrupted by his shoulder, came in late, was, I guess, chasing tail at that point and was losing confidence by the game. And he persevered. So there's character. He persevered, he got through the season, played as a sub in the grand final, had an impact, and then he's had a clean slate, a clean run in the off-season. And he's brought that preseason form where we were very happy with how he was performing in the off-season/preseason. And he's come in and he's doing more than what we could have hoped for him. And I think the ceiling, there's still a bit more to go for Patrick Lipinski over the next few years. So really keen to see where his trajectory ends up in his career. Please, Craig, put Billy Frampton back into the back line. Put Jeremy Howe... You can't even, I don't know, I can't say put Jeremy Howe forward, but you can still have Billy Frampton, Darcy Moore and Jeremy Howe and Braden Maynard, along with Isaac Quaynor and John Noble in your backline. I think that's okay. I think that's fine. I don't know exactly how it looks when it's all said and done, as far as when we get players coming back into the team. But I said in the stream yesterday, I'm concerned with Billy Frampton. I feel like he's being a bit of a gap filler at the moment. Yes, he's versatile, but I feel like he might have a John Noble story this year. The John Noble of 2023 plays most games for the year, every game I think, and then might miss out in the finals due to the availability in the forward line. And then it just comes down to how tall do we want to play in the back line. Who do we play against? Do we play against a Carlton? Do we play against a Melbourne? Do we play against a GWS? What does that look like? So I'm just a little bit concerned, but I'd like to see Billy Frampton swing into the defence because forward line is just not his thing. You can just tell. He doesn't have that aura. His marks don't stick. He's not fast on the lead. So I'd like to see Craig switch that magnet back to the defensive line. Okay, so how do Collingwood win against North Melbourne? Bring the heat. Obviously, as we always do, apply the pressure. North Melbourne are going to want to bring that. I think bringing in those younger players, injecting that youth and that testosterone, if you want to call it, injecting that into the team and bringing the boys up, I think that's going to be huge. Another good game by Brazzy, bringing the same intent that he had in the Melbourne game, will be something that we'll need to permeate around the team to ensure that we're not taking this game lightly. Like I said, I know I've been saying, yeah, it's a bye, we get 2 weeks off and we're striding, we're la-di-da. No, I'm still mindful, like, if I was wearing the black and white and I'm preparing for this game, there's no way I'm talking about this is another bye. My mentality is completely switched up. But because I'm on the outside, I'm allowed to have a laugh. That's the way I approach it sometimes. Under the roof at Marvel, I'd like to see our defensive half transition improve. It's something I've been harping on the last few weeks. It's still not there yet. Still not there. So can we see a little bit more of that? At Marvel against North, there's no reason why we shouldn't be scoring 40 plus points from defensive half. So I'm putting that as a pass mark. Can we score 40 points or more from defensive half transitions against a team like North Melbourne? Still side bottom. What do I want to see from side? I want to see him also clean up his disposal. I think that will go a long way for him to keep his spot. His disposal hasn't been the same. He's been thrusted around from the half-back flank to the wing position. He took that massive mark on King's birthday, but let's just see still side bottom, clean up the ball use, and I think that will go a long way with our transition going from end to end. Looking at some critical matchups, we know Darcy Cameron has been playing well, probably had his colours lowered a little bit by Max Gawn, but it is Max Gawn. I think Max had like 24 disposals and 2 handfuls of contested possessions and clearances. He was unreal. He was probably one of the only players that sort of could walk out of that game from Melbourne with his head up high. With Darcy, he only had 8 disposals, but he battled and wrestled with Gawn all game. He had no help from Billy Frampton or Kruger, which was interesting. We thought maybe Kruger would pinch hit, but Kruger served as that true key full forward. And we saw that awesome goal on the boundary from Darcy Cameron. He knew what he wanted. He threw the bench and the bag, and he moved. He had his line up and he set shot, and it was good. It never looked like he was missing. So you take those as wins in a game when you're playing against someone like Max Gawn. And now he's got another great task against someone like Tristan Sherry in the ruck, who is arguably a top 5 ruckman in the league this year. He's been unbelievable. And his pressure, I think there was a snippet from that game against West Coast where he had this long 20, 30 metre effort trying to apply pressure on one of the West Coast players when they were trying to kick it inside 50. And he just got a touch on his backside to impact the kick, and it was actually an unreal chase down. He never looked like he was going to give up. So that's what Darcy Cameron's coming up against this week. So just looking at the ruckman across the league, Tristan Sherry is rated as the 3rd highest rated ruckman behind Max Gawn and Pitnet. Pitnet's only played 6 games, so you probably go Gawn, Sherry, Marshall, and then Darcy Cameron as the 4th highest rated ruckman. And they're both elite in their clearances, disposals, and contested balls. So it's going to be a really intriguing matchup against North. We talked about Nick Larkey, very accurate, great mark on lead. Darcy Moore, that's his role, that's his assignment. Play tight. I don't think anybody else can play on him. Jeremy Howe, probably not quick enough off the mark, although quicker than like a Billy Frampton, but more of an aerial intercept sort of player. I think Darcy Moore has the athleticism to really lock down in a one-on-one role. That's why I like that matchup. I don't think Braden Maynard can match up with Larkey. He's probably a little bit too tall for him. I think Nick Larkey's like 6'5", 6'6". So he's a giant, and if we can minimise Nick Larkey's impact on the scoreboard, it will go a long way for Collingwood having an easier win. When you have players like LDU and Jai Simpkin having big games like they did, along with George Wardlaw, you're going to expect the midfield room to have a really difficult challenge on their hands with players high in confidence. I think you've got Tristan Sherry giving them first use out of the midfield as well. So players like Jack Chris, Mr. Consistent, Nick Dacos, hopefully if he's available, Josh Dacos rolls through there, Lockie Sullivan, these players are going to have a big task on their hand. And as always, the midfield battle is going to be massive, but just because of the way North got that win, brings up their confidence. They were up by 33 points in that last quarter against West Coast, and then they were down, and then they found a way to come back in front of a hostile crowd. So This is a team that's going to come in and they're going to come in all guns blazing. I can feel it. The win for Collingwood essentially means we're right up there in the top 4 contention. If we lose, we're sort of going to be hovering around the 6 to 8 mark at least till post-bye. And we just can't lose. Like, it would be a travesty for us to win against Melbourne in a game where many tipsters and pundits would have thought Collingwood wouldn't win. And then we go and we win against Melbourne. And imagine if we go and then lose against North Melbourne. That win against Melbourne counts for nothing after that. That's how I see it. Must win. There's no other way to put it. If we lose, we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. Will give us little chance post-bye to make top 4. We've got, after the bye, we've got Suns at Gold Coast, who are undefeated there. We've got the Bombers at the G, Cats at the G, Hawks at the G, who are arguably the best form side in the comp right now and just are playing an unbelievable level. We've got the Tigers as well, who just beat Adelaide, Carlton, Sydney, Lions, and then Melbourne to finish the year. So there's not a single, I mean, it's AFL, right? There's never going to be an easy game, but you just look at those matchups. There's teams in form there. There's teams that aren't playing well like the Tigers, but then they have a massive game like they do against Adelaide. They're going to get Troopers back. They're going to have Tom Lynch back by then. Dusty Martin's going to be playing that game. They're big time players. They're big game players who are suited for the occasion. And I guess the win for North Melbourne just means they get a back-to-back consecutive wins in their season. It fast tracks their growth. Winning fast tracks teams' growth. And Alistair Clarkson coaching committee will be very cognizant of that. And that's why I think this is a danger game. And we can't slip up. We just can't let it slip. So let's see how we go, and we can discuss it after in the post-game show. And be sure to join the pre-game show as well leading into the game. See you guys. Bye.